All right, all right. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. I have just, let's see, over this past weekend, I just drove 26 hours from Montana to Dallas, and whew, it's been crazy. Crazy week last week was, but here I am. Okay, so we're going to be talking about, and it all went well, by the way. It was a good trip and stressful a little bit, but it's all good. Okay. Boy, all this stuff, all of the things that we're studying and this textbook, and looking at my own family, and we have like three like big crazy things going on in extended family right now, and so I'm I'm looking at stuff going, and I'm applying these concepts to it. It's been kind of fun, but it's like wow, it's amazing. Families are very interesting things, and I'm sure all of you have interesting stories about families. So, what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm being redundant here, but what we're doing is we're taking basically the author's stories of their own personal life and extrapolating from that and applying the concepts, the applying the story to the concepts of Bowenian thought. So here we go. Hopefully, I'm able to do this justice. So here we go. It is a little bit different of a feel, and I hope y'all are getting that. And it's okay. It's just a little bit different. I actually kind of like it, but it's an adjustment in my head a little bit. Okay, so when we talk about defining ourselves, we talk about differentiation and defining self. I don't know if it would be accurate to say that I would use those words completely interchangeable. I see differentiation as more of the process of defining self, and then the result of that is a defined self. But again, we could be playing with words, so I'm okay with whichever way you go on that. So here's one of the things in the field of counseling that we talk a lot about, and that is a very high value, rightfully so, and a very good thing in my mind is self-awareness. So with self-awareness in the backdrop of your thinking, I want you to think about your own level of awareness of your own anxiety, your own emotional reactivity, and that within your family, your extended family. This could be your family. You could have a current family of spouse currently and children, your parents, your family of origin, your spouse's family of origin, your maternal grandparents, your paternal grandparents, aunts and uncles, and your spouse's maternal and paternal grandparents, and his or her aunts and uncles. Right. So it's like, woo, we've just got family everywhere, right? Do you recognize it? How good are you at recognizing it? Can you sometimes actually even predict it? You can see it coming. You'll see a conversation between two members of the family, and you're like, oh, I know where this is going, right? I mean, you know what I'm talking about, and you may be in it or you may not be in it, as well as triangles that are involved in that process. Um, so in order for us to be differentiated, in order for us to define ourselves, we have to be able to monitor our own anxiety and emotional reactivity and manage it. I like those terms, monitor it and manage it. So monitor it. Do you see it coming? Are you recognizing it? Have you got your little scale and it starts rising and you're like, oh, I feel it. I see it. I know it's there. And then you manage it, right? Because if we get too much anxiety, then we're going to have a tendency to become emotionally reactive. That may mean we shut down and back away, or we get really intense, or we maybe even so intense that we just blow up, scream, yell, cuss, throw a fit, whatever that might look like for you. Also, and some of the observations that I'm making are like no duh, right? I mean, you're listening to this going, yeah, isn't that just common sense? Isn't that just everybody? Well, yes, I know, but nonetheless, we're still identifying the elements and or aspects of defining self. So I really believe that this third point is right on. I think the closer the relationship, the more is at stake, right? So if um, somebody I barely know cusses me out or says you're a fool and an idiot or you don't know what you're talking about, I'm like, okay, right? I don't care, right? There's no threat to me. If my wife says those things, right, the closest person to me, or my mom, or my dad, or my brother, then it becomes there's a lot more at stake, right? So if Joe Blow on the street or distant relative or um, acquaintance rejects me, who cares? I mean, it's a little ouch, but whatever. But if my wife rejects me, it's right up there with close to the end of the world, right? I mean, this is like, oh, this is a big deal. Not trying to be a drama queen, but you know what I'm saying. Um, so these tendencies, and we'll talk more about this. And I look at this we'll talk about this from a biblical perspective as well as just the way Bowen talks about it in terms of it feels like something's missing as they try to explain this passed down process. And as Christians, and as we've been taught, and certainly we've all had varying degrees of levels of teaching on this process of um, things being passed down, but and how that works, right? The sins of the fathers and passed down from generation to generation, those kinds of things. Um, However you believe they are passed down, it is pretty widely agreed upon, both in the secular world and in the Christian world, that things do get passed down from generation to generation. And it's almost mystical. It's almost like, how does that really happen? Well, part of it is spiritual, part of it is observed and learned, I believe, and I believe part of it is probably genetic as well. So we have certain genetic predispositions. It doesn't mean that we're going to come out exactly the same way, but we may have some predispositions that we pick up along the way genetically from our grandparents and parents, and possibly even further back, probably even further back. So here's another aspect, and that is in marriage, you often have a person who overfunctions and a person who underfunctions, and they kind of trade and borrow back and forth from one another in terms of functionality and in terms of their own sense of self, in terms of their own levels of emotion and anxiety and how they handle those emotions and how they handle that anxiety. They also said that to the degree of intensity that the overfunctioner functions, the same level of intensity the underfunctioner functions. I don't know if I said that all grammatically correct, but y'all with me. So I want to say that as Christians, we are, well, first of all, we are human beings with a free will to choose, and we also have been given a rational mind to understand things. So if one finds themselves as that underfunctioner, that can be fixed and fought against. And if the overfunctioning is overfunctioning in an area like, say, a workaholic, to where they're causing problems because they're neglecting their family, then that can be fixed as well. So there's certainly some feeling of, I struggled as I read, because it's like, wow, so without Christ, we're just kind of, we're going to turn into what our parents and grandparents turned into, and there's really no hope, right? That's just how it's going to be. All those relationship dynamics are passed down, all those personal characteristics are passed down, and we're just stuck with, we're just going to repeat the same mistakes. And I believe as Christians, that is very much not the case. Also, Bowen would say, and this is probably pretty close to accurate, I would think, in terms of seeing this played out with working with couples, that when we've talked about our differentiation score, that couples oftentimes have a very similar differentiation score. And I really like this because we're looking at self-concept fed by, where does self-concept come from? It comes from feedback from others. Wow, you're a really fast runner. Wow, you're really smart at math. Well, whatever those messages that we've picked up. Boy, you're not very good at fill in the blank, right? So all of these things, good and bad, fill in our self-concept as and what out of those things that are said to us that we pick up, and what out of those things that are said to us that we discard. And then from our own self-observation, what do we see about ourself? And then we have self-esteem. That's going to play into how good we feel about ourselves in essence. And then we have our self-knowledge. What do you know about yourself? And you got to understand. I hope you're not saying, "Oh, I know everything about myself." God chuckles. Oh, yeah, sure you do. There's a lot we don't know about ourselves. There's things that we know about ourselves that others don't know. There's things that no one else, including us, know about ourselves. And there's things that others know about ourselves that we don't know. It's called the Johari quadrants. There's 4 quadrants. And I just kind of went through that. I don't think I did it complete justice. Johari comes from Joe and Harry, literally. It's kind of funny. So there are things that we don't know about ourselves, and understand that and accept that and acknowledge that, but also be that to me, what that says is, yeah, okay, there's things I don't know about myself. I want to learn more about myself. I think of the scripture in Psalm 139, David says, "Search me and know me. Search my heart, O Lord, and see if there be any unrighteous way in me. Search me and know me," right? So if the Bible's saying that our heart needs to be searched, then there's stuff in there that we don't know about. And I want to know. I want to know. As painful and as difficult as that is sometimes, right? When you get these revelations about, whoa, how selfish I just was, right? And like, whew, okay, so there's some selfishness there. And then there's our social self, and all of this impacts obviously our social self, and that would have to do with our every relationship, from our most intimate relationship to our behavior at a ball where we hardly know anybody, right? So that's our social self, that whole gamut. And all of this plays into who we are, ourself, and how we act and interact with other people, and how we act and interact with different people, right? So we act differently in front of people, more so than we would like to admit, probably. People say, "I'm just me and I don't change no matter what, no matter where I am," or, okay, well, whatever. Very, very few people on this earth truly are that way. Very, very few, if anybody. Okay, so we already did the overfunctioning and underfunctioning. I don't know why I put that in there again. I guess it's said a little differently. Fusion. So we have distance or separateness and fusion, right? So we have this awareness, hopefully, right, of how emotionally fused are you with people. And when I say positive or negative, to a really high degree of fusion, that's going to be negative. That's not healthy, but having some level of connectedness with people is, and we can flip-flop back and forth quickly. This can shift with different relationships based on conflict. You can go from fused to completely cut off with someone in an instant, right? I mean, that's really unhealthy and really extreme, but it happens. I like the term shock absorber. I took that straight from the book. But when there is family stress and anxiety within the family, and this can be extended family outside of the immediate family of origin, or it can just be within the family, conflict in the marriage, or conflict with the children, or problems or challenges with the children. The marriage is, and really I would say probably is, supposed to be the shock absorber for that stress, which means that the marriage is impacted. The marriage absorbs this, right? So then has to do something with it. Hopefully do something healthy with it. Talk through it, process through it, work through it, those kinds of things. Okay. So he talks about functional level and basic levels of differentiation, and this being where this comes into our pseudo self. Our pseudo self would be, there is the raw and real me when I'm having a deep talk and bearing my soul with my wife or a close family member. And then there's the pseudo self who may have some struggles going on in the background, but goes to a party and smiles and says, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" And yes, I'm fine. And there's nothing that, it's not really saying that there's anything wrong with that. It's just recognize that as a reality. Now, obviously, if to an extreme, there is something wrong with that, right? If I'm just Mr. Pseudo Self too muchly so, and with too many people and in too many settings, then that is problematic. So whatever level of differentiation your parents and your grandparents experience, Bowen would say that is the level within a very narrow range, close to that, in other words, of differentiation that you are going to have, and that the level of differentiation over a lifetime is very difficult to change, which is very interesting to me. And again, this is where I go look at secular versus spiritual. When as Christian counselors, we are turbocharged by the power of the Holy Spirit and by prayer and asking the Lord to help us and the power of the Word of God and right. We could go on and on with a long list there. I'm not trying to be all inclusive on that list, but basically with God, right, we can tap into His power to bring about change deep within us. But even with that, sometimes it is still a slow, very small incremental process. I always encourage clients to look at their progress over months and years and not weeks and days. That makes sense? Seems it's a bit like, oof, that's rough, you know. Yeah, it is. And again, if you, it's almost like it could, without the Lord, there'd be hopelessness, I believe. So, and that's the spiritual application there. And I'll probably come back to that. I mean, that just keeps coming back in my mind, which, you know, as a Christian, we can't help but think about those things. So, it's interesting that the author talks about his divorce and how they went to counseling, and then in an attempt to overcome these generational processes, and seems to have had a fair amount of success in marriage for a time period, and then came to the realization that, wow, I really didn't change much at all, and our marriage ended. Like, wow. Again, seems a bit hopeless to me, and especially without Christ. We talk about breaking generational curses. We talk about the inner healing. We talk about uh, dying to self, forgiveness, restoration, changing, renewing our mind in Christ. There's all these things as Christians that we can do that that helps in this process. The this third bullet, what we're talking about here is very oftentimes you'll see situations where a divorce is very similar, and maybe it's a similar time, it's close to the same time frame after X amount of years of marriage, and it's whether you know it or not, right? So, you know, your grandfather was married for 5 years and divorced and remarried your grandmother, and that's all you knew, and you didn't even know it. And then your father did the exact same thing, married for 5 years and divorced. And possibly the emotions were even more intense, and that these emotional processes, whether we're aware of it or not, are passed on down to us. Again, I would say some of that is through observation and learning, social learning, imprinting, if you will, you know, like the little ducklings following the mama duck. I mean, you grow up with it, you see it, this is how you react emotionally. Okay, you know, you pick up on that. But I also believe a lot of this is very much spiritually passed down. So this this fourth bullet here was one of those things that as I was writing this down, I thought, well, really, like, no kidding, like, of course, it's almost state the obvious, why don't you, Brad? That's like, I know. So you go through death, loss, divorce, crisis, job loss, moves, whatever, right? All of the learning, all of the processes is very much building. Sometimes it feels like when we come to a crisis that we've lost everything, all of the emotional gain that we've gained, we feel like we lose it all, right? We've had a big meltdown, whatever. But this is like, no, it's transferable from circumstance to circumstance, situation to situation, and it is builds and stays with us throughout our entire life, all of our stages of life, and I very much agree with that. I think that's an important concept. How aware are you? These are questions that I've asked myself and that I ask myself frequently. And as I was reading, I was really asking myself, how aware am I of the emotional triggers in my life? Do I see them coming? Have you ever just got really angry about something? You may have not said anything out loud. It may have just been internal. And you're like, whoa, what triggered that? Where did that, like, wow, where did that? Well, that happens to me. Fair. I was going to say all the time. That's exaggerating, but it happens, right? I'm like, oh, I got so angry about that. And it was distant from me, or it was it was a level 2. And my anger is like at a level 8. Boy, did we tap into something unresolved in my heart, right? And well, yeah, we did, right? So what is that? What is that? So it's always good to stop and explore those things and better understand what are those emotional triggers inside of us, because we have hidden ones. We all have hidden ones. Um, all relationships have some level of anxiety, and if you were to say that you don't agree with that, I would just say that you, you're blind. I'd just say you're blind. There you go. Real simple. Blind. Sorry, but yeah. But the question is not do your relationship have anxiety or not. Hopefully you're beyond that. The question is, and if you're really, really angry about what I just said right now, then that means you're really, really guilty of it. Probably that means you need some work. You got some work to do in that realm. Are you aware? Can you spot it? Can you recognize it? Are you aware of it in others around you? Or are you aware of it in yourself? Can you correctly identify it? Do you know what triggers it in yourself as well as in others? I love this. The most romantic love story isn't Romeo and Juliet, who died together, but Grandma and Grandpa, who grew old together. Man, I tell you what, this almost brings tears to my eyes. I remember when my mom died in '08. So 11 years ago now, and I'm sorry, 10 years ago. We're moving towards 11 years. Sorry, I'm already in 2019. Whew. But just to see them walking and holding hands, and it was like, wow. If you've never experienced that or never seen that or don't have family members that had that love at an old age, it's just a very precious, very beautiful, very sweet thing. Anyway, I digress. Forgive me. A little sidetrack. So these multi-generational processes, Bowen believed, were primarily passed down through the mother. Now he did say primarily, he didn't say only, right? So I don't really, I don't know why he believes that to be the case. I think it is because, and certainly if you go back a few years, that's probably true today, but I think women are the primary glue for most families, right? We go to grandma's house for Christmas. Grandma kind of pulls everybody together. Grandma dies, and suddenly we don't have big family get-togethers anymore, right? So, right. So I think that's what he's looking at, is kind of how generally speaking, women are more open. Women share their emotions more openly. Again, it's not true for everybody. Well, I've got a mom, or my me or what, you know, yeah, I know, I get it, but that's why I said primarily and not completely. So I don't know how I feel about that. Completely, there's probably something to it to some degree. Some of this, as I was reading, I was thinking, okay, so what's the science behind this? You know, or what, how, and I know it's been, I'm sure it's been studied. I don't, I'd have to go dig and pull up some uh, journal articles and some research. But anyway, again, I digress. Sorry. Um, the way in which your uh, moms and grandmothers, possibly aunts, uh, handled or managed their emotions, dealt with things, right, is passed down, whether they be healthy or unhealthy. They are the passers down of the emotional processes in families, generally speaking. It's kind of interesting. Um, and a lot of this is covertly passed. It's not like, you know, oh, this is how you feel in this situation, although that could happen too. But it is through observation and learning. This is the generational thing here. I love this. You know, you've got wow, baby. I'm going to assume these girls are sisters. So generations. We have one, two, three, four generations. So we have uh, grandmother to the baby. We have great grandmother to the baby. Um, that it's just I don't know. I like this. I was actually looked for a picture of my own family because we could have my dad and then my wife and I, and then my oldest daughter and her husband and their baby, right? And so you've got these generations, and man, we're connected. You know, stuff is just passed down. um, but so think about your uh, grandparents. Ask questions if you get a chance to. It's just a general healthy thing. I'm not prescribing that as a assignment, obviously, but you know, what roles who plays what roles in your family, right? Peacekeeper, rescuer, troublemaker. I was looking for a different word for troublemaker. I was thinking of the person that you know, argues and stirs up the pot and plays the devil's advocate and, you know, whatever, right? The black sheep of the family, maybe. So what are these roles and how they affect you? Because they do. What triangles existed in your family of origin and or in your grandparents' family? Um, do you have any awareness of that? And again, you're probably not unless you talk to people. And then this goes back to previous. I don't know that this was in this particular chapter, although I think he did talk. Yes, it was because he talked about spending some time individually with his mom and building that relationship as he did research on his family history. I know, for example, I had a uncle, Uncle Cedric, and he died, good grief, 10 years ago, probably, 15 maybe even 20. Sorry. And I loved old Uncle Cedric. He was stoic, quiet, rock solid, thin, tall, old man. You know, he was an old man when I was 5 years old, right? It seemed like. And but I don't know, we just had a special connection, and he was mechanical, he was an engineer, and he would fix the toilet, and he would change the oil in his car, and I would watch, and I'd ask questions, and I'd talk to him, probably bug the heck out of him, probably not, I think he loved me, I know he loved me, but I'd ask him questions, and he'd explain stuff to me and tell me about things. But I very much had an individual relationship with Uncle Cedric. I had an individual relationship with his wife, my Aunt Bernie. And so you know, but there are also people that I think about, Aunt Janice and Uncle Paul. I have very little individual time with each of them. Most of the time with them has been together time, right? So think about that in your family, and it's always a healthy thing, and it helps you in your own differentiation to have individual relationships with people in your family. So I'll leave you with that thought, and appreciate y'all. Hope you're doing well. Contact me if you have questions or comments or concerns. Thanks, and goodbye, and God bless.